Welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan, the creator of the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I work with powerful, ambitious women who want to level up their energy and their impact on this beautiful world. I'm a wellness and mindset coach, all things plant-based living, intuitive eating, stress management, mindfulness, yoga, meditation. And today I had the privilege of interviewing Suzanne Catty. Suzanne is a plant whisperer and curious human. After 19 years in the music industry doing international marketing and band management, Suzanne returned to her first love, plants and healing. The first 5 years, Suzanne worked as a natural health practitioner. She saw her research and developed an understanding of hydrosols, the co-product of essential oil distilling. She literally wrote the book, and hydrosols, the next aromatherapy, turned a waste product into a global commodity and established a new healing modality. Suzanne works for the plants and created the first 100% organic aromatherapy company in Canada in 1995, and has pursued and promoted organic, sustainable, and restorative plant products and growing techniques for more than 25 years. As you will hear, Suzanne is a wealth of knowledge and really a genius at connecting all of the dots between the personal, the community, and the global. She has had an incredible life and has so much history, knowledge, and passion for plants to share with us. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Energetically You. Today I have the privilege of interviewing Suzanne Catty. She is a self-proclaimed plant whisperer and curious human. She has a very interesting background and comes to be all things natural health. And that's one of many things that we align on, but I'm so curious to get to know her better and hear her story. Suzanne, how are you? Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a delight to have a conversation about all things natural and plants, and especially at this moment in the world. We are at such an unusual point in time. It's giving us so many opportunities for all the opportunities and things that we're losing. Many doors are opening, including doors in people's minds. So I have to say that I'm finding this quite a interesting and curious and slightly weirdly optimistic time.
Amazing. Me too. I have the same sensation. So let's dive into that a little bit. What are you feeling and feeling that is shifting for you personally, first off?
Well, I'm pretty hardcore. I mean, I have been environmentally, socially minded, sort of, big picture thinker my whole life. I was raised that way. My parents were, well, in fact, distant relatives were involved in the setting up of Amnesty International. So I grew up with, in the 60s, we had, in fact, we had a professor from Mexico who was kicked out of the country during the student riots in 1968, and he came and lived with us for nearly a year. We had other refugees come and live with us. We were in Czechoslovakia in 1969 and were captured by Russian soldiers. So To be 8 years old staring down the barrel of a machine gun, that's my relationship to and my understanding of the world has been colored by very unique kind of experiences, because we were able to get out of that, whereas usually people who are in war situations actually can't get out of it. But I was raised with that attitude that everything is done personally, community, globally. So before you act, even when the thought process has to go through those 3 stages to make sure that, that stone you're throwing in the water, those ripples go in 360 degrees. And you better make sure before you throw the stone that none of those ripples are going to cause a negative impact on anyone or anything, literally, personally, community, globally.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what is your personal experience with the pandemic been in terms of, has it shifted your work at all, or I'm personally finding it more of a internal work project for myself which is resonating in my business, but I don't know, what are you finding that has shifted for you or in your world?
One project that's actually taken up most of the last 10 years of my life, that was completely sidelined by the pandemic. We were just about to, there was travel planned for securing our, literally making the final confirmation of the sustainability and viability of our raw material supply chain, and the final laboratory work and clinical trials were going to happen. And of course, all of that was immediately shut down. So that was shocking. And it's a project that it's actually a natural product for the aquaculture industry. So it will be it's a certified organic, 100% plant-based supplement for farmed fish that will help alleviate and take a whole lot of drugs, chemicals, antibiotics out of that process, out of the aquaculture industry. So it's a game changer on a global level. And that was very frustrating because, like I say, that's, the better part of 10 years. However, it's just the green light happened a couple of weeks ago and we got another green light yesterday. And so that's back on track. But for me, my clients, obviously I couldn't see anybody personally. So, you had people going through all these different stages of, it's going to go away. Like all of the sort of, stages of grief, denial, anger, all those things that humans do. And of course, the whole world was being subjected to this tirade of violent speech coming through social networks, and especially coming out of the United States. And it was inescapable. And so as a health practitioner, I spent most of the last year talking people down from the place that the social networks took them. Personally, I left Facebook over a decade ago because I said at the time, this is Hitler waiting to happen. This is going to become fascist. This is going to become violent. It's going to become propaganda. Because I was raised with that kind of political awareness of how that happened in other countries. Mm-hmm. So I was horrified. So I use no Facebook associated websites. And I have, I've talked about this for 10 years, but when the pandemic started, literally people would come to me in these, hysterical states because of the social networks. And so I spend a lot of time just in conversation with people, helping them contextualize what they were being told. When it comes to real estate, they always go location, location, location. If we're talking about information, it's context, context, context. Because if somebody tells you something, but you don't have a contextual framework to understand that information, then it's actually not information. It's just data. And data doesn't help unless you have a way of understanding it. Again, a context. So that's what really, and I've always been big about context. I'm a writer. I worked many years in the music industry, working not as a musician, but working with musicians. And again, the context for fame. We see what happens when people become famous, people like Amy Winehouse, where literally fame kills. It was with the pandemic, the social networks were literally killing people. I mean, suicides and with young people. So, that was a very strange turn of events with people over the last year that is how, as a health practitioner, I was able to support people, and it's why people were coming to me. So it made me optimistic because people actually could feel that this was a quicksand of badness, for lack of a better description. And they wanted to get away from it. But, once you're in the quicksand, the minute you start struggling, you just sink deeper. So that was quite a new perspective for my healthcare practice.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Can you put your finger on a catalyst or a moment where you really understood the healing potential of plants?
Oh, that was as a child. I grew up with, I come from a long line of witches, I always like to say. My grandmother, on my father's side, she worked with Rudolf Steiner. On my mother's side, she was German, and so she came from that whole, tradition of generations of wildcrafting your own. She lived in a rural area. I mean, there was no hospital or anything. So, much of the world still resorts to going out into nature to harvest their remedies. So I was raised with that. I was raised going for walks in the woods, and I remember being told I can't have been more than 10 because I know where we lived, and being shown the leaf of a hawthorn tree, and before the leaf unfurls, it's rolled up tight like a cigar. And I remember my grandmother telling me, you eat these. This is when you harvest them, when they're tight like this, and you eat these, and it's good for your heart. Well, if you look back 50 years ago, there was no scientific clinical evidence for hawthorn being good for the heart. Now we have it now, but I was being taught a tradition that had been going for, hundreds of years, possibly thousands, using hawthorn for the heart. And yet there was no, what you would call, evidence for it at the time. So when the science started, I'm going, oh yeah, right. Yeah. I was taught that as a kid. Yeah. Cool. So, like I said, I'm hardcore. I was raised understanding our relationship to the planet, plants. We foraged for mushrooms. We went out and foraged food from the wild. Eating a variety of food from all over the world, no barriers to that connection. Learning to grow plants. I think maybe I was 12 when our vegetable garden was actually big enough that we could harvest the bulk of our vegetable food for the year, and to process it. So learning how to make jams, jellies, preserves, pickles, fermentation, sauerkraut. That was life. That was how we lived. And it's very much a European tradition. If you talk to anybody in Europe, really, even a lot of young people today, but certainly anyone over 40, chances are they were also raised that way. And so, it's more, I think in North America that, the post-war years, it was very different here. The war didn't happen in North America. The war happened in Europe. Rationing didn't end until the 50s. And I'm sorry I keep bringing this back to politics, but really, in truth, everything is political. And when it comes to the environment, unfortunately, it has become a political football. But, North America didn't have that devastation from either the First or the Second World War, or Vietnam, or Korea, or any other war. There's been no war on this continent since, the Civil War. So it was easy for us here in North America to distance ourselves from nature. The grocery stores were full of food. Pharmaceutical companies were running. You could go out and get aspirin. You didn't have to go and, peel the bark off a willow tree and pound it if you wanted to make an anesthetic, which is what you would have been doing if it was 1948 anywhere in Europe. So yeah, it's kind of, to me, it's almost like it's a DNA connection. Our circadian rhythms, that is a DNA connection to the planet. We can't, people go into space, the circadian rhythms are, NASA works on how to keep the circadian rhythms going so that people can sleep. And, we know that people who do night shifts and their circadian rhythms, their connection to the planet and its rhythm, once that's disrupted, we see all kinds of a cascade of health problems, and it's very well documented. So, on a personal level, I'd live in a glass house so that I'm completely connected to everything Mother Nature is doing 24/7. That would be my ideal.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you that Europe has always been ahead of the game in terms of the connection to nature. And I mean, I think it existed here too. I mean, in my case, both sets of grandparents, had full gardens, processed everything as you were mentioning. And it was really the following generation that sort of lost that knowledge and interest, really. It was like moving into our highly consumer quick fix mentality from sort of, like you say, the 50s on. So what do you mentioned your clients, what sort of things are you helping people with specifically, or in what is your mode of helping people?
Well, I think, I support people on their healing path, because at the end of the day, the only person who will ever heal you is yourself. The mindset, the desire, we are our own best doctor. And so what my clients have told me over the years, and I've been I've been lucky and very rewarded because I've had clients who've stayed with me for well over a decade. I mean, I've been a practitioner for 25 years, and I have literally had clients who stayed with me for 14, 15 years, and came weekly or bi-weekly for 15 years, literally. So, what people tell me is that what I really do, besides working with plant medicine, and I'm a body worker, and I make remedies. But what people really tell me I do is that I help them understand themselves and connect to themselves, so that even if someone's coming for a massage, we're talking for 20 minutes before they get on that table. That's not the way most people do massage. So, people come in, they get a massage, they leave. You're in and out in 50 minutes. Not so much in my house. It's an hour and a half. It's because we talk for 20 minutes. And if we didn't do that, how would I know what, if I'm working with essential oils, how would I know what oils to even choose to use on you on that day if we did not have that conversation? So again, it comes back to being very, sometimes I say I'm old fashioned because, I walk my talk, and I really, I want to be very clear about being as pure in my work as I can, because I know that it matters. You know, sometimes good enough is fine. But if you're talking about health, good enough is often not fine. You really want it to be it isn't about being the best, it's about being the most precise, the most appropriate for that person at that moment in time. And if we're talking about natural health care, that's the reason you go and see a natural health care practitioner, because you can go and see a doctor and okay, this is the formula. You say you have these 3 symptoms, then, one of these medications is what I'm going to give you, and off you go. That's not the way natural health care works. The whole point about natural health care is that it is customized to the individual. So although I had a big product line at one point, I had over 128 products. It was a little out of hand, but every client who comes is getting a custom formula that is customized to them on that day. And the efficacy it's exponentially increased when you do that. It's the same with food. Food cravings. If you're craving something, there's some people say, oh, if you crave it, it's not good for you. Well, that may be true for addictive substances like sugar. But generally speaking, if you're craving something, you need it. I once saw a child. I was in a grocery store and I came around the corner and there was this child, maybe 12. And those plastic lemons full of lemon juice. She picked one up off the shelf. She unscrewed the cap and she sprayed at least half that bottle of lemon, squeezing that lemon into her mouth, and then screwed the cap back on and put it back on the shelf. And I'm just watching, and I didn't say anything. So she went off. So of course I took the lemon off the shelf, but I looked at the child and she had dark rings under her eyes, indicating stress on her liver. Little bit, probably, it's hard with children because to say they're overweight, it's not, kids go up and down and in and out. It's part of growing, but definitely, the weight was unhealthy weight. And I could tell that this child that it was an impulse, completely non-conscious, because her body was so desperate for this lemon juice that she literally took it off the shelf and poured it in her mouth and just kept going.
I love that story.
It was amazing.
Can
So,
you,
we
sorry.
as humans, we are animals. That at the end of the day, we're animals. And if you watch an animal, if they have parasites, they go eat something that's really aggressive and, gnarly so that it cleans the parasites. If parrots, they go and eat clay to help them digest, what they're eating. Like the animal world is, they just rely on their instincts. If we don't, if we could get over that, the issue of the fact that we are also animals, our instincts would guide us.
Yeah, it's a big part of what I teach in intuitive eating, that we're the only animals that have a multi-billion-dollar industry telling us what we should eat because we apparently have decided that we don't know without somebody else externally telling us, right?
So you do intuitive eating?
Yes, that's one of the things
Cool.
I coach on because,
Very cool.
yeah, I truly believe that once you tune into these cravings and understand exactly like you say, all the reasons that you might be craving something, most of them are in tune with what you actually need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. I like the phrase intuitive eating. It's, people can understand that in like it sounds new agey, but it's not. It's really quite a precise term. It's really a good term.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wonder, can you touch a little bit for those people that aren't really in the essential oil world? Like, what is the difference between, having rosemary on your potatoes to using a rosemary essential oil in, massage scenario?
Well, essential oils have been around for a long, long time. And in fact, one of the things I'm known for is hydrosols, which are the co-product of essential oil distillation. But actually, in truth, we were distilling hydrosols probably 1,200 years before we were distilling oils. So we have found evidence of actually a woman alchemist and her distillation unit, which was made out of clay, and it's somewhere between 300 and 500 BC. She was active. And we know from residue inside of the clay still that she was working with many plants, but one of the ones particularly was rose. So we also know from records, Egypt, Greece, and then, later, and certainly through the Middle East, lots of writings describing the use of plant waters, basically, hydrosols. We didn't perfect the distillation process that allowed us to actually get the essential oils until nearly 1000 AD. So there was a long, long gap. I mean, like I say, it's, 1,300 years between the first still we know of that made hydrosols and the first stills that we know of that made essential oils. So the big thing about essential oils is the volume of plant material required. So a very generous plant, I was talking to someone about lavender, so we'll use that as one example. So lavender, it takes about 100 kilos of plant material to make a kilo of lavender. If you want to do pounds and ounces, then it would be around 100 pounds of lavender would make just under a pound of lavender oil. So that's a lot of plant to produce this
Potent.
Concentrated liquid.
Mm-hmm.
That's generous. If you're talking rose, you're talking 10,000 pounds to a pound.
Wow.
Yeah. If you're talking rosemary, it's similar to lavender. It's around 100, 120 pounds per pound. Generally, it's hard I've always thought in kilos, and if you actually are working in the essential oil world, everybody's working in kilos and grams and what have you. But it's more or less approximate that way. But then there are plants, we have some interesting plants here in Canada. One, for instance, I used to take my students because people say, oh, essential oils are so expensive. Well, from certain places, they certainly are. But generally speaking, they're not. And I would try, you can give people numbers, but it isn't quite as the same as when you see it with your eyes. And I would take my students to harvest Labrador tea. It's a very famous plant. Long, long, long history of use. The indigenous people here have used it and it grows all across the boreal. So really the northern part of the planet. So we find this variations of Labrador tea, not just here in Canada, but through Scandinavia and parts of Russia. So really that northern circle of the planet. And long history of use for diabetes, liver issues. In France, it's actually used for liver cancer. So a huge amount of scientific evidence that its efficacy on diabetes has also been proven. But you have to pick it in end of June, beginning of July. So you have black flies, you have mosquitoes, you have horse flies, and you have deer flies. All of these biting insects. And the plant grows in peat bogs. So it is the insect heaven. And horseflies and deer flies, when they bite you, you actually bleed. That's how much they take out of you. So I would take my students and they'd get all excited. Oh, we're going to harvest Labrador tea. So, a couple of hours, because that's all you could literally stand, because it's 32 Celsius, it's in the 90s, and it's hot and sweaty and sunny and insects. And so, an hour, 2 hours, and we would come out and they might have 50 or 60 pounds of plant material. And then we would go back to the distillery and we would put a metric ton, 1,000 kilos of plant material into the still. And 12 hours later, you would have 1 cup of oil.
Mm-hmm.
And people would just, they were speechless. They couldn't, it was so mind-boggling. And then you would, the students would be, oh my God, like, this is ridiculous. This is so cheap. This is just, it's insane. It doesn't make any sense. Oh my God. And it's like, yeah. And that's really, in truth, that's what is happening with so many raw materials. I mean, if you look at our food supply, there are lots of things that are way, like, I cry, when I see, it makes me cry when I see a head of cauliflower that's $5, but it also makes me cry when I see a head of cauliflower that's 89 cents. Because I know how long it takes to grow a cauliflower, and I know how hard it is to grow a cauliflower. And especially if you're doing it organically without chemicals, somewhere in there is the sustainable space. And that, going back to where our conversation started, what gives me optimism is that, 6 months after this pandemic, after the lockdown started, and, come autumn, and people had a little bit of freedom in the summer, things had lightened up a little, but then, massive lockdown again in September. And suddenly people went from saying, I want my old life back, to, oh, maybe I don't want the old life back. Maybe there is something better. Maybe, maybe the fact that we got off that treadmill, that rat race treadmill of, work, debt, the whole thing that's going, inequality, all of the stuff that came together in that extraordinary year that was 2020. Human rights, just everything, women, people of color, the planet, all of it converged. And suddenly people were saying, I don't want the old back. I really don't want the old back. And, for people to start, I think that's when things really shifted, is that I found people wanted to talk about what are the other possibilities? What other options exist? How else could we do this? How else, I want, people want to go vegan, and then, they're like, everything they're eating has cashews in it. And I want to cry because I understand the cashew supply chain, and 2 years ago, the Zimbabwe army had to take control of the cashew crop because the Western corporations were refusing to pay a fair price, so the army took control of the cashew crop, and now cashews are number one ingredient in vegan food. And we need to connect the dots. We need to contextualize everything so that as soon as we start doing that, we can then see where those dark spots are that need to be removed in order to have a brighter, lighter, greener, more equitable, and truly sustainable future. Because, it's bad enough what my generation is going to see is going to be bad. But for the kids, we have to change. It is not an if or anymore. It is a must. So, I find that now my clients are, again, wanting conversation, but the conversation is now shifting to, even people who a year ago, oh, Suzanne, don't talk it, you and your climate change, because I've been talking about it for 40 years, literally 40 years. And now they're coming to me and they're going, so tell me. That's huge. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I was at the Wisdom Conference, which was virtual this year, on Friday and Saturday. And Paul Hawking was a speaker, and also Tristan Harris. I don't know if you know who those people are, but I'm guessing you do. And anyway, one of the major takeaways was that there's this global shift in the awareness around climate change externally, but that there's also this internal climate change, if you will, an internal shift for many, many people. Can you speak to that?
I would say that is definitely a beautiful and succinct description, that people are undergoing an internal climate change. That is absolutely just music to my ears. And it is, I would say that, yes, it is true. Going back to essential oils, it's, I got into essential oils 25 years ago, more. It's been my profession for 25 years. I've been working with oils for probably just over 30. And in the beginning it was all about, because they can help us shift. Well, I didn't see too much shifting happen. What I saw was a shift from essential oils being aromatherapy, being a therapy, which it was in Europe. I saw it come over here and become a sales channel. And, the pressure that it's putting on the natural world is not sustainable. The way essential oils are being produced and sold around the world is really not sustainable. That's not to say that plant medicine and plant extracts can't help us with that internal climate change. But yeah, I think I can't just that's just gorgeous. I just love that so much. And internal climate change. Um, yeah, I might have to, you have to let me know who to credit, because you know,
Soren,
that's,
who's, I don't know if you know the Wisdom 2.0 conference. He's been doing it for
mm-mm,
12 years, and
mm-mm.
his last name escapes me. It starts with a G. One second here. But his first name is Soren Gordhammer. Soren Gordhammer.
Okay.
And he's the Wisdom 2.0 Summit
Okay.
that they do every year. And normally it's hosted in San Francisco, but I got to go this year because it was virtual and much
Right.
fun.
Yes, everything was virtual this year.
Yeah.
And that's interesting too, because, I live not far from Toronto, and yet even though it's only, 70 miles, if you don't live right in the town, you have basically the equivalent of dial-up internet.
Yeah.
And that, again, how that impacted people over the past year has been fascinating. But that's a whole nother conversation. But yes, I think, like I said earlier, context is so important. One of the things with when we're talking about the climate and plants and food, and I am relentless. I absolutely happily admit that I am relentless on the subject, and I will never stop being relentless. But what people say to me, oh, cow farts, oh, please. And it's like, so how, I always say, okay, so how many cows do you think are on a farm? Oh, 100, maybe 200. I'm like, how about 10,000? They're going, no. I'm like, yeah. 10,000. So do you want to talk again about cow burps? It's not farts, it's burps. And do you want to talk about the swimming pools of manure? Mm-hmm. Do you?
Well, and just the velocity, right? Like an average, I believe that the average cow can live to between 17 and 20 years. And right now their average lifespan is 2 or 3. I mean.
Oh, not even. When I saw a calf, I'm 6 foot tall. And when I saw a calf that wasn't even a year old and its shoulder was at my chin, it was just like, okay, this is so seriously wrong. And, I don't expect everyone to go vegan. I was a vegetarian. I stopped eating meat when they started feeding animals antibiotics. I was a child, and I just knew that every time I ate meat, I was gonna end up crying, basically. And I kept trying to convince my parents it makes me cry, and that's the fights were enormous.
Very abstract for some people, right? But
yeah, and even though my parents were so, aware on so many other levels, but it was kind of, also for my mom, 3 kids, she didn't have a lot of help. So, she's, what, you want me to make you a different dinner? No, you're going to eat what's put in front of you. Mm-hmm. But, I didn't eat meat again until well into my 30s. And literally for over a year, I was dreaming about meat. And I went to, for regular once every few years checkup at the doctor, and rode my bike there. And 2 days later, got a phone call from the doctor, and she said, I know you're a practitioner, so I'm going to give you 2 weeks to do what you do, but your hemoglobin is so low that if I had not seen you standing upright with my own eyes, much less that you rode a bike here, I would put you in the hospital. Like your blood cells are not red. You are so anemic. And I have had a history of anemia. It's just one of those things. So, for me, sometimes I have to eat something that will keep me from literally dying of an anemia. And there's a lot you can do with vegetables, but there is a point when, my survival is at risk. There are people, it's very interesting, all the microbiome research, and with essential oils, they talk about the microbiome. Well, here again, context is really important, because while it is okay to take certain essential oils internally, and they are used in food as natural flavor, any package of food that says natural flavor, chances are it's essential oils. There are essential oils that actually kill your microbiome, and should not be taken internally. And I've had way too many people over the years who have come to me with their digestive system completely destroyed from being told by a multi-level marketing company that they should be taking an essential oil 5, 7, 10 drops every day. So, again, our knowledge keeps increasing, and yet, as you say, with your phrase intuitive eating, which is so lovely, if we learn and remember to connect and listen to what our body is telling us, and our connection to the earth, we would know these things. We would connect sooner. We would, I didn't eat meat because it was making me sick, but there was also the, to me, it was also, farming changed when I was a child. It was the 60s when they started giving soy to cows. Cows never ate soy before.
Or corn.
They'd let them out in the field after the field was cropped, the animals would be let out there and they would eat what was left. They would glean, and clean up the soil. They ate some, whatever it was, but, this artificial, how agriculture changed and again became industrialized. Even after I realized that, there were things like organic meat. That didn't really exist when I was a kid, but I knew that if I ate meat in Europe, I didn't cry. And if I ate meat in Canada or the US, I cried. Okay, awareness, context.
Mm-hmm.
I could have at any point gone back to that diet, but I chose not to, even at the risk of my health, until it became actually literally a serious risk, just out of because it makes sense. It's I want to have the smallest footprint I can on the earth. I worked in the music industry for many, many years, and I flew all the time. I did international marketing. I was on airplanes all the time. But you know what? I lived off grid that entire time. So, and that was, again, a conscious choice, because I was aware of my footprint, even though we didn't call it a carbon footprint when you got on a plane in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. I was aware that, I was driving a propane powered car when I was in university because of pollution, because of climate change, because I wanted to walk my talk. I wanted to live a sustainable life, and therefore I have to do whatever I need to do in order to achieve that. And so if that means living off grid, cool. And I'm putting on my suit and my high heels, and I pour a cup of coffee and I give it to my cousin, and she puts milk straight from the udder of the goat into my coffee cup, hands it back to me. I'm putting on my makeup, drinking my coffee, and then, I go to the train station, hop on a train, and I'm in London for work. I come home at night because it's music business. So you're out late for a concert. You come home and there's a candle and matches on the counter because there's no lights. Not a problem. this is, I need to, it's again, contextualizing everything, looking at where all those ripples go. And my ripples went in 360 degrees, and I kept having to turn around and look, I'm okay, wait a minute. Am I thinking about the ripples that are going out behind me when I'm looking forward? Well, if I'm not, then I'm, shame on me. So, and I think that's what it comes down to with health. Whatever tools we choose to use for our health, and really everything we do is a tool for health. Your sleep, your exercise, your job and the stress it causes, your diet, the medicines and medications that you use. I mean, everything is health. It all has to work together. Just like the planet, we are one interconnected, interdependent system. So are you as an individual. And it's fascinating to me that as these awarenesses, the sort of the new age never really, there was nothing new about it. It became a sales channel, and really crystals are the new blood diamonds. If people knew what went on for them to have their little crystals, they would cry. So they should find out, and maybe we can then diminish that damage. But if we start with ourselves and then out into our community and then out into the world with this understanding that each unit is an independent that is then dependent on the next level, that would change so much about the way we act and think and what we desire also. The consumption addiction, that to me is the biggest downside of the pandemic, is the consumption addiction, the I shop, therefore I am.
Well, and what you said about our ripple effect and having greater awareness of the ripple back, if you will. And I do want to be respectful of your time. So is there anything you wanted to leave us with besides that beautiful analogy?
Well, what I would say, the reason I call myself a plant whisperer is because the plants talk to me. They talk to everybody. That's the truth of it. The planet and every living thing on it is communicating with every single one of us all day, every day. And, it seems facile in a way to say, go out and go for a walk around the block. But you know what? Go out and go for a walk around the block. Connect with where you live. And, and I realize that in a lot of places, people don't have any nature around them anymore. Cities, green space, that's real estate that somebody's not making money on. As one, I heard a developer describe it that way once, and I was just like, oh, it's really a shame that murder is illegal. Of course, I don't mean that, but you know what I mean? It's that idea that green space is not valuable. But to connect, truly connect, even smelling earth, there's something that is triggered on such a deep genetic encoded level in your body. And people have started keeping houseplants because they're so desperate for green. Bring that green into your life in any way you can. If you do live in a place where there's no green space, it's still good to go out for a walk. But even, even a cut flower, a blade of grass, touching the leaf on a tree, especially this time of year, spring, when the leaves are just unfurling. To touch a newly unfurled leaf, I have goosebumps thinking about it. It is as exquisite an experience as touching the skin of a newborn child. It is the life force that is transferred into your hands through that experience. If we just allow ourselves to feel that, it's life-changing. It is absolutely life-changing. And it allows us to get over ourselves and to make that connection that it is always, everything is always happening on those three levels: personal, community, global. And as you were touching that leaf, the tree is being loved by you, and that tree is releasing 1,000 chemicals as your finger stroking that leaf and you are loving that leaf. The tree is it is feeling that love, and it is sending chemicals down into the earth, and those chemicals are traveling through the earth, and the mycelium in the earth is feeling your love, and it is sending that love out through all of its network, and that is the entire planet. So you can literally, by just the act of touching a leaf and stroking a leaf, communicate with the entire planet and bring that into your heart. And I would say, that those moments when, it can all be hitting the fan, you can even recall those moments, and it will bring the healing of Mother Nature into you in such a profound way.
I love that. Well, thank you, Suzanne, so much for being here today and sharing your insight. Where can people connect with you if they want to work with you?
My email is sayhello@SuzanneCatty.com. And I am happy to connect with people. I'm also on LinkedIn. That is the only social network I use at the moment. That probably won't change. But yes, people are happy. People are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. And, also once people are connected to me, I am not, I do a lot of work on the phone. And so, for sessions, I'm kind of, like I say, I'm a little old fashioned in that way. I'm a big fan of the human voice. Just to be in conversation with people, as we were today. And it was really such a joy to speak to you too, Megan. Just some exquisite wordsmithing, just absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much for listening to Energetically You. I hope that this episode has helped you to tune into your natural energy sources so that you feel more energized and focused throughout your day. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more ambitious women just like you accomplish their goals. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it on social or in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Megan Swan Wellness. See you soon.